Chapter 6 A Matter of Honor. Following from a safe distance as Link and Sing left the palace, and then watching as the two of them rode off toward the bridge to the mainland, Facade was still feeling conflicted. Not just about watching his friend go off with someone who they didn't know or trust, but also about having received his own challenge the previous night. The words written by the mysterious Rebanock were replaying in his mind so much that the king could almost hear them being spoken out loud, but he still didn't know what to do. "Darling, why don't you put the Triforce of Wisdom back?" he asked, picking up the red pyramid after they had walked back to the altar. "I'll take this one back to Link's chambers, where it'll be safe." Queen Zelda agreed, and as soon as she started over to put the green pyramid away, Facade whisked the Triforce of Power out of the north wing as quickly as he could. True to what he said, the king went back down the corridor and upstairs into the tower that the Lord Sheriff called home, but after setting the red shimmering pyramid on top of its pedestal, he didn't immediately leave, instead sitting down on the nearby chair. "Alright, look, I know we don't like each other," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "but I need some advice, and not the kind where the one I'm asking tells me to look inside myself." "Link did not need my counsel to make up his mind," the red pyramid replied. "That is the difference between you. Heroes do not sit around and think for days on end when they are challenged. Heroes act. Your honor has been challenged, so go and show the people of Hyrule that you are indeed fit to rule them. Unless you aren't." Facade really did not like the Triforce of Power, but after listening to its words, everything seemed so simple. Back when he had first encountered Darknut at Manji Estate, he had not sat there and pondered what would be the most politically correct solution. He drew his sword and put the evil knight in his place. That settled it, so the king left the chambers and started back down the stairs, not stopping until he had reached the royal armory. Link had his silver sword, but the standard blade of a knight of Hyrule would work just fine, and he still had the magical shield of his family. As for his armor, it was a dulled but flexible suit of chainmail, but when he put his family's ancient blue sapphire ring on his finger, the armor became the color of shined bluish silver. Aghanim was still essential for the upcoming duel, and King's Cross was only a stone's throw away from the border to the southern outskirts, so he would simply pick him up along the way. "You're going where?" Zelda asked once he explained the situation. "To face who?" "Zelda, my darling, I know that you're worried," Facade explained, now heading toward the front doors of the palace. "But this is something that I have to do. I'll take Aghanim with me, and I'll send your cousin Miranda to stay with you until we return." Naturally, this was not enough to make her feel better, and like any good wife, she tried to make him see reason. "What if you get killed? What if this is all a trap? What will I tell Miranda if something happens to her husband? Why can't someone else go in your stead?" Facade loved her for showing such concern for his well-being, but he simply told her that everything was going to be alright, and that this was something that he had to do in order to prove his worth to both himself and the people of Hyrule. "No," the queen said sternly. "Facade, this is foolish, and I forbid you to go. Now you can either put away that armor willingly, or I'll have the guards take it from you." Again, he understood why she was acting like this, but the very notion of the guards taking any kind of action against their own king was just ridiculous. At least until Zelda called for them. At her command, they moved in front of the open door, while two others left their posts in order to surround him. Once there, she explained to the armored guards that Facade had taken leave of his senses and needed to be restrained for his own good. And now they were closing in. "You can't be serious," the king said, backing away as they got closer. "I'm the king of Hyrule. You can't just arrest me like some common criminal. Stand down, guards. I said stand down. Look behind you, it's Ganondorf." He hadn't really expected them to fall for such a desperate deception, but surprisingly, they did. Turning around to find only an empty staircase, Facade used that moment to run past the guards at the door, heading into the courtyard and towards the stables. A long time ago, he had ordered that his faithful horse Perfection be saddled dawn each day in case he was ever needed, so all Facade had to do was whistle, and the beast came galloping out at full speed. By this time, Zelda had called for the alarm to be raised, causing the guards in the courtyard to all start pursuing him as he jumped onto the white horse. The gates were still open from when Link had departed, and now that the alarm bells were ringing, the guards were working to close it. But if the king hurried, he might just make it before they did. Spurring the horse and having to swing around to avoid his pursuers, Facade still couldn't believe that the guards were actually coming after him on his wife's orders. It was nice to know that they were loyal to her no matter what, but right now it was also frustrating to have to continually dodge their attempts to grab him while he rode toward the gates. Granted, this was a lot easier to do from horseback, and after swerving perfection around to the last one, the king had a clear run for the gates. Whack! There was a kind of whooshing sound after something flew through the air, and a boomerang like Link's struck him in the shoulder as it went past. The armor protected him from harm, but didn't keep him from tumbling sideways off the horse, where he slammed into the ground just as the boomerang circled back into the hands of its thrower, Zelda. Now there was no escaping from the guards, and although Perfection had started to charge in to help him, the animal now seemed to be rethinking this strategy. "Facade, I love you, but think about what you're trying to do," the queen said, putting the boomerang on her belt as the guards picked him up. "Running off to face some nameless challenger is reckless and irresponsible. Hyrule needs you here, ruling the kingdom, not running off like you and Link are still carefree layabouts." "Layabouts?" Facade exclaimed, trying but failing to pull free of the guards. "Zelda, right now Link is risking his life for the good of Hyrule, while I sit here doing nothing. It is absolutely killing me that I can't be there to help him, and now if I can't go and face the man who spits on my honor and challenges my right to rule, Zelda, what kind of king does that make me?" For a while everyone was silent, and then, after starting to say something to him but stopping a few times, the queen ordered the guards to let him go. They did, returning to their posts as if nothing had happened at all, and although Zelda still protested what he was doing, she understood why he wanted to. After all, if they had waited to try and rescue her 5 years ago, and instead relied on things like diplomacy, well, she might never have been freed of Ganondorf. "Just promise me you won't meet this person until Aghanim is with you," she said, picking up his sword and handing it to him. "And if you even start to suspect that something is wrong, I want you to get out of there." "I promise, my love," Facade agreed, taking the weapon and sheathing it. "And I'll be back before you know it." Giving her a quick kiss, and trying not to limp from the pain in his leg as he walked toward the horse, the king had to bite his lip to keep from crying out as he pulled himself into the saddle. The soreness that he felt was sure to fade by the time he reached King's Cross, so he waved goodbye to Zelda before hitting the reins so that Perfection once again started toward the gates, which were now opening again. "Don't worry, Perfection, I don't blame you for not helping," the king said, patting his horse on the head. "You couldn't have possibly taken all those guards by yourself, but let's not dwell on the past any longer." Spurring the animal once the gate was completely open, Facade rode away from the palace, reaching the bridge and galloping across to the mainland. Where Link would have turned north to circle around to places like Tantari and Parappa, the king instead turned toward the south. This was the only road that went toward the King's Cross and the southern outskirts province, and although it was a bit of a detour to Snake Palace all the way down on Lake Hylia, it was worth it to have the wizard at his side again. Hopefully Aghanim had already received his message, and they would meet part way, which would save a lot of time. Also, it would mean less time that Zelda had to be alone, since she still had those night terrors, and no one was able to calm her like her cousin Miranda. Even with all of the responsibilities of married life and being king, now that he was in his old armor, riding Perfection towards unknown dangers, Facade felt like he had 5 years ago, when he had rode in from Arcadia to rescue his princess. Did he regret marrying Zelda and taking the throne? Not for an instant, but he did miss the freedom that came from being what the queen called a carefree layabout. In a way, he was envious of Link's position as Lord Sheriff, since his friend had all the power of any lord of any province that he entered, but was also always doing something new and exciting. Of course, now it was Facade's turn, and after conquering this Rebanock character, it was he who would return a hero. "Faster, Perfection!" the king exclaimed happily. "Onward to King's Cross! Onward to one more adventure!"